So there are some new faces. So so last week, so today's topic is our real identity. So this is the second um, session of the Discover Yourself course. The first session was titled Search for Happiness, where we talked about, we'll have a recap. So where we talked about what is that we are looking for in life, and then we concluded, and the Vedas also conclude that everyone is looking for happiness, satisfaction in life. And then we went about talking about how there are different paradigms, and the paradigm that science and technology, or the modern day paradigm, offers a lot of material comforts, but still paradoxically there is a lack of satisfaction, inner satisfaction. So we discussed about some of those points, and then we discussed the what's a real problem, definition of a real problem, and so on and so forth. I'll show you the slides. So this is the agenda for today. So a quick recap, an introduction to the question of who am I, and then the characteristic of the ATMA, and then how to perceive the true self, and then if there is time, then we'll go into the journey of the ATMA, or the journey of the real self. Yeah, so this is a quick recap. We started off with the story of 4 wives, and then we talked about search for happiness.
Prabhu, very good. Maybe can you be on that side? There is nobody in the sofa. We can't see the person.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so much.
Is that okay? So, in spite of the incredible material advancement, there is still a pinprick. There is discomfort, there is uneasiness, there is incompleteness, and of course, there is stress, there is depression. There's so many issues that people are having, and mainly due to lack of inner satisfaction. Everybody is looking for satisfaction. Because we have nothing against the material advancement or the technological advancement, but it's a paradox, because we expect something and then something else is the result. So there's a gap in what we expect and what's delivered, and that's why there is a pinprick somewhere. Like how everybody here seen the movie Matrix? The Matrix? Where the main character, played by Reeves, he says there's something in this world, like there's some kind of he says, just paraphrasing, and he says that it's like a splinter in the mind, and there's that uneasiness. In fact, many of the concepts of the movie were taken from the philosophy of the Gita. And then we defined what is a real problem, because problems, everybody has a lot of problems. I hope it's just not me, right? And of course, the problem varies from person to person. In fact, we discussed about how one problem for a person can be actually a means of solution for another. So, but then the Vedas define, the Bhagavad Gita defines 4 real problems. and then before defining the 4 real problems, it gives a criteria of what are the criteria under which a problem can be classified as a real problem. Anybody remember from last week's what were the criteria? Can one of you say?
Old age.
Right, those are the 4 problems, but what are the criteria?
All of us.
Unavoidable. Like
What?
you cannot avoid it.
Yeah.
Okay, you cannot avoid.
And we get it.
Common to all.
Common to all, and we get it, whether we like it or not.
No one wants it, but
Right. So these are the criteria. Common to all, no one wants it, and no one can avoid it. And so this is the special prerogative of the. And then we talked about, of course, what are these problems? We discussed in length about those 4 real problems: death, old age, disease, and the root of it all is birth. So Janma, Mrityu, Jara, Vyadhi, Dukkha, Doshana, Darshanam. So these are the 4 problems which fits into those criteria. And then, in fact, it's there's a, I had a funny experience from not a funny experience, but it was, so one of my friends, he used to actually live in Bombay. And you know how it works in Bombay, right? I mean, the trains and, the public system of transport. So, in fact, one of my friends, he says that, people traveling on the train in Bombay, while getting to the train, it's as if, there is some diamond inside the train. And then people just jump into the train. I mean, I saw a video recently. It was pretty, pretty intense actually, and very risky also. And then while they come out of the train, it's as if there's a snake inside the train. So people just jump out on the train. So he was miserable actually. He was like, he was going day in and day out to his office using this, the train. Public transportation, but so he was like, I want to get out of this. So he got an opportunity to actually go to UK. I mean, he was working in the IT field, and he got an opportunity to go offshore. So he was very happy, So he goes to London, and then he sees that by 7 p.m., 7:30 p.m., he goes on the bus, and then the bus is empty. He's the only one traveling in the bus. So he thinks that this is heaven. Wow, this is like, But then after a few days, he sees that there's a camera in the bus. And then so he asked driver, why there's a camera in the bus? What is the purpose? The driver said that because most of the times the buses are empty and there are very few people, there are sometimes these thieves or rogues who come and mug these people, hit them and then take them. Sometimes some of the passengers are killed also. And then my friend was thinking, actually the train probably was better. But from the incident we can see that problems are there everywhere. Whether it's here or there, problems just take different shape. So, depending on our situation and depending on our environment, there is nobody who can escape from problems. And there is nobody who can escape from the real problems. So, birth, death, janma, mrityu, jara, vyadhi. And then we talked about not only do we have to go through all these problems, we all talked about how the miseries in general can be categorized into 3 categories: Adhyatmik, Adibhautik, and Adidevik Klesh. So the miseries that's caused upon by our own body and mind, right? And then the miseries that's caused upon us by other living entities, our roommates, our managers. There's a huge list, right? Other living entities who can cause us miseries. And then there's miseries that's caused upon by the natural calamities. So the human form of life is very special because one can try to solve, or at least one can inquire why should I go through these things? Why should I go through birth, death, old age and disease? Why should I go through death? Why should I go to disease, old age? Why should I go through so much suffering? Why should I go through the miseries which are separated into three categories? So the humans, the Vedas say, is the human body is a special gift, and where you can inquire, where you can reason about higher truths in life. So the human form of life is very valuable. So we discussed about how the special, the rest of the session we discussed about the special prerogative of human life, and that is to inquire about how to relieve oneself from suffering, how to solve these problems of life. So the Bhagavad Gita is a solution book. So the Bhagavad Gita gives a solution of how to solve the real problems of life, and also put an end to the cycle of samsara. So there's a quote, Atatva Brahma Jigyasa. This is from the Vedanta Sutra, which says, now that you have attained a human form of life, please inquire. Please inquire about your true identity. Please inquire about, what is my real purpose in life. Please inquire about the deeper things in life, and try to overcome all these problems. So this was a quick recap. Swapnil, you want to do the skit right now?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll start with the skit. We will after the skit we'll jump right into the session.
So, Kushal is the main character of this skit, and he's going to represent the feelings a seeker goes through. So, let's see.
For many days I have been thinking about clearing up this clutter on my table. There's been so many papers. Let me clean that up. What a pleasant memory. This is how I used to look when I was 10 years old. Although this has brought many good memories from my past, this has also brought many big questions that I've been always thinking from so many years. I have read so many books, went through my schools, did my graduation, but I never come across answers for these questions. Even the mainstream science could not answer this. I must approach a friend for answers to these questions. Hey Swapnil, how are you doing?
Hi Kushal, long time.
So,
Nice to see you, brother. What brings you here?
yeah, So Swapnil, I know that you read Gita and you're a very spiritual person and you know about the nature of life and the true spiritual identity of the living entities. That's what I assume from what I know about Gita. So I have a recent revelation, a moment of revelation, a moment of divine realization. So I thought it might be something of your interest.
I'm very glad to hear that you have developed some interest in the teachings of the Gita. I'm eager to hear what your epiphany was.
Well, I see my picture of my 10-year-old self recently, and I came across so many questions of my past. I'm completely confused about it. So when I was 10 years old, I used to look like this. Now my body has grown up so much. My thinking patterns have completely transformed. But yet I feel that I am the same person. When I was 15 years old, that time my experiences were different. But yet I seem to be the same person.
Yes, in fact, to add to what you have said, earlier it was thought that the whole body, all the cells in the body are replaced after every few years, but it was thought that the nervous cells do not change. But now recent studies show that even the nervous cells change every 7 years. So every 7 years, you are in a completely new body. So this again triggers that same question, who really are we? Although we have completely changed our bodies with time to time.
That's an interesting fact. Actually, that further fans the spark of my curiosity about this. You know what? I'm having so many conflicting thoughts. Sometimes I feel just leave all this, ignorance is bliss. But for how long can I keep myself deluding with this temporary bliss?
You have thought indeed in a right way. Thank you.
I have been thinking of approaching a spiritual authorization, maybe organization or authority about it. But I always thought I can always depend just on my own intelligence. But do you have any such organization or such authority you can reveal?
Yes, indeed. If you see, even with most of us, it does happen. We think that for these topics we can depend on our own intelligence. But if we look around, isn't it true that whatever we know or whatever we have now is because we have learned it from others? So, would it not be true even for spiritual topics about the nature of life, about the nature of who we are?
That seems indeed true. My masters and everything, I seem to have learned all these different things from others.
In fact, so yes, it is indeed worthwhile lending an oral reception to what a spiritual authority like the Gita has to say. In fact, in our short conversation, we may not be able to derive much out of the discussion. By the way, I know of one nice series of sessions called Discover Yourself going on somewhere nearby. Would you like to come with me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Come, let's go.
Sure.
you, Swapnil, and Kushal for the nice skit, setting the introduction to. So we'll go right in. Answer the question. To answer the question, who am I? So this is the fundamental question. One of the fundamental topics from the Bhagavad Gita. So as you know the setting, Arjuna is actually is struggling to reason as to whether he should not fight, whether he should fight or not fight in the battlefield. So, in fact, the most difficult situation is when you have to make choices in life, right? Anybody? Of course, there are different categories of choices, right? So when there is a choice between, when you have two choices, one choice is right and one choice is wrong, the decision is easy, right? I mean, you choose what is right. But in Arjuna's case, the choice was between two rights. So he was torn up, he was torn apart from, in his heart, because it was a very difficult decision to make. On one side was his call for duty, which was right. On the other side was to take care of his kinsmen, or the family, which is also, part of, part of the Shas, part of the code of conducts from the Vedas. So both of the choices looked right to him. So, and he was stuck in this confusion right in the beginning of the battle. So that's when he actually broke down, and then he tried to reason and see what choice he should select, but he became more confused, and that's why he submitted himself to the counsel of Krishna. And that's when Krishna starts speaking the Bhagavad Gita. In fact, if you read the Bhagavad Gita, the first chapter, only Arjuna speaks. Krishna doesn't, open his mouth. It is only when Arjuna surrendered to Krishna that, I'm not able to solve this on my own. That's when Krishna started speaking the Bhagavad Gita. And the fundamental thing that Krishna, so how does Krishna solve his problem? By making a paradigm shift. Because when it seems like both sides of his argument on one plane seems right. On the material plane, this argument on both the sides, both of them seemed right and both of them were important. Then Krishna resolved the conflict by making a paradigm shift, by moving the basis of his arguments from the spiritual platform rather than from the material platform. So he made a paradigm shift, and then he spoke the Bhagavad Gita to resolve Arjuna's inner conflict that he had in the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita. So the very first topic he touches upon by making the paradigm shift is answering the question, who am I? So if you're asked the question, who are you? What would you say? Nobody. Your name, okay. Okay, your occupation, yes. What else? What else? Where do you work? Yeah.
Where you belong, where you come from.
Where you belong to, where you're coming from, the background you're coming from, yes. What else?
I'm a human being.
Okay, you're a human being. The species of life. What else would you answer? Who are you? If you ask the question, who are you?
Son of so and so.
Son of so and so. Okay. What's that?
Place you born, where you come from.
Right. Yeah, nationality, based on the nationality, based on the company you work. What's that?
God
Yeah, male or female. Yeah. So, yeah, all those answers are partly right. But then, I'm a software engineer. It can be based on occupation, it can be based on the company you work. So, whatever we strongly identify ourselves with, that's how we are going to portray the answer as. If you strongly feel as part of a community, then you introduce yourselves as a person belonging to a community, belonging to a company, belonging to a profession. So, depending on our inner thought process, inner cultivation of who we strongly or what we strongly identify with, that is how our answer is going to be. And belief system can be also. But then, can all these things change?
Some can, some not.
Well, yeah, at least 10 years ago, probably 10 to 20 years ago. I mean, all these can change now. At least some time ago, some of these things were not changeable, but all these things can change now. So then, what happens to our identity? In fact, you've heard experiences where there are our fathers or little elderly people who actually are used to just going to work day in and day out, and suddenly they retire. What happens to them? They suddenly feel a loss of identity, right? They suddenly feel like they have to again somehow keep themselves engaged, and they feel bored or they feel disconnected, and so on and so forth, because there is a strong identity that's created with reference to that work or with reference to that company, and so on and so forth. So similarly, there can be change of circumstances in life which can lead into identity loss. In fact, an extreme circumstance can lead one to an identity crisis, where one loses a part that one very closely associated with, and then suddenly the external part disappears from their life. Then one can get into an identity crisis or identity loss. And in fact, that's also one of the things that Arjuna was facing. He was facing an identity crisis right in the battlefield, because he has to kill his own family members. Because a part of his identity is also his family, and when that was going to be taken away or tried to be that was going to be removed, then he was resisting and he was telling, "I'm not going to fight," because because it's a change in what you associate with. So all these things can change, and one can lead. So what is our identity? So, of course, there are different paradigms, and the paradigm that the modern scientists give is that we are in our body, and that's all in all, and that it's all made of a bunch of, our identity is made of nothing but a bunch of chemicals, and then that is our whole existence. So this is one proposal as a paradigm, or the paradigm given by the Vedas and the Bhagavad Gita is different. Right. So this is Arjuna's breakdown. He gives several excuses why he should not fight. And then the real reason is because fear of death of his relatives. But then this is where Krishna answers the question or addresses his concern, that Krishna's first response is that we die only because we think so. I mean, in other words, we don't die. And this is where he distinguishes between what is our real identity. So many of us, 99% of the population thinks that I am this body. And we act in our life based on this conception that I am the body. But then Krishna here introduces a completely different paradigm, that we are not our material bodies. That we are something eternal. We are eternal spiritual living entities who are encased in this material body. So Krishna, in another place in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Ishvara sarva bhutanam hrideshu arjuna tishtati brahmayan sarva bhutani yantra rudani maya. He says, yantra. What does yantra mean in Sanskrit? It's a machine. So Krishna calls his body as a highly sophisticated machine made of the material energy. So this is a highly sophisticated machine made of the material energy, and we are seated in this machine made of this material energy. So Krishna, this is how Krishna defines our identity. So this is Gita's definition of what is our identity. So if you ask different people, different paradigms, there are different answers, but this is Gita's definition. Gita's definition is, this body is not my true identity, it's a vehicle in which I am placed. This is the anatomy of Gita's anatomy of our body. In fact, then Krishna goes on to say, okay, you're not the material body, but you're a spiritual living entity. Then what is the difference between that conscious living force, the spiritual entity, and this material body? The material body can perish. The material body is temporary. But the real me, the real self, the spiritual living entity is eternal. The body dies, but I don't die. So this is the first paradigm that Krishna places before Arjuna. So he says, you're worrying that your relatives will all die. But Arjuna, there is no death for the real spiritual entity. The death is only for the body, external body. So even though they may physically disappear from your sight, but all these people that you see, they are not, the true self is not dying. What is dying is only the external body. So this is one of the first arguments, but Krishna gives many other arguments also to give counter-argument to Arjuna's reasoning as to why he should not find them in the battlefield. But we'll not go into all those details. So the main reason we think we die is because we misidentify with the body. Because we misidentify with the body, it's unbelievable, right? All of you, it's not so difficult to understand, this concept. Like, how many of you drove in a car here? Okay, that's most of you. Hari, right? So, let's say Hari has parked his car here, right? And then suddenly there is a screeching sound, and then there is a loud bang. And then the sound is coming from the direction that Hari has parked his new car, which is actually, the car that he has bought after, so much intense effort and hard work. Of course, Hari is not like that. I'm just making up the story. So, what do you think Hari's reaction would be? Go and check is one thing, but immediate reaction, what will happen? Shock, exactly. Shock, palpitation. He's going to sweat. He's going to panic. Even if he's sitting in the office, talking to his manager or colleague, he's going to just run, right? Because that's the immediate reaction. Oh, what happened to my car? The other things can wait. But what is your name? Utsav. So Hari goes and finds out that it's not Hari's car, but it's Utsav's car. Now, how will Hari feel? He'll feel relieved. Exactly. He'll feel very relieved. But then now, how will Utsav feel? Of course, he will feel morose and, a lot of chain reaction will happen. But then what is the difference? It's a car. It's not that there was an accident with me, right? Even if it was a Hari or Utsav's car, anybody's car here, if there's a damage or an accident that happens to your vehicle, it's not happening to you, but then we feel the pain, even though it's not happened to us. Why do we feel the pain? Because we have invested our consciousness there. Because of the attachment. Because we have invested our consciousness there, and especially it's my car. I mean, there are thousands of cars, and then there are unfortunately, there are many accidents. But then we don't feel the same way for each and every accident. It's only when it's my car, when my consciousness is invested in a particular object, when it's my, when there is that connection, that attachment, there's that investment of our consciousness in a particular object, and something happens to the object, then we become bewildered. And that's what exactly happened to Arjuna also. If the opposite side had no relatives of Arjuna, do you think Arjuna would have gone through moroseness? No. He would not have gone through moroseness. Because he had that investment, he had that attachment, he had that investment of his consciousness in that relationships that he had with people on the other side, he became morose. And the same thing goes to this body. So I was explaining to you with the external vehicle. Now Krishna defines this body also as a vehicle. But then how is that whatever happens to this body, I consider that it happens to me because of the close attachment. Then I feel that whatever happens to this body is happening to me. So when the body dies, I feel I am dying. But Krishna says that's not true. Because we are eternal beings. So whatever happens to the body, it happens to the body. But of course, this at least theoretically we can understand this. To realize it is another level. But this is the premise on which the Bhagavad Gita, the verses in the Bhagavad Gita are spoken. The fundamental premise, as they call it, the axiomatic truth. So that we are eternal beings, but we live in a body which is temporary. You can repeat. We are eternal beings, but we live in a body which is temporary. So when the body dies, we don't die. So this is Krishna's, this is the verse from the Bhagavad Gita. Natva eva ham jatunasam natvam neme janadipa nachaiva na bhavishyamaha sarve vayam ataparam. So it says, never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. I mean, it's a little convoluted, but basically Krishna is telling Arjuna that never was there a time when I do not exist, nor you, nor all these things. So he's telling to Arjuna about everybody that's assembled, and then nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. So in the future also we will exist. We have existed in the past, we are existing now in the present, and the future also will exist. So we are eternal. So this is one of the verses from the Bhagavad Gita. So just to recap the point, the body dies, but we continue to live on. So take a few minutes, maybe a minute or two, to think about. I mean, this is, of course, many of you would have heard this. I'm sure you have seen the Mahabharata serial. At least this basic principle you have heard it from that serial. What do you think, if you put this in perspective, I mean, if you imbibe this perspective, what do you think are the implications? especially in terms of at the personal level and a social level. What do you think are the implications at a personal and a social level if we accept this concept, at least intellectually for now, and more so, when you realize it, that's at a different level actually. At least when you accept it intellectually, what do you think are some implications on a personal and a social level?
Free from all worries.
You can be a little louder.
Yeah, free from all worries, liberation.
So, what is your name?
Surrender.
Surendra is saying free from all worries.
You'll be not scared.
He'll not be scared. That's a very good point. Very nice point. He'll not be scared, especially just to add on to, sorry, what's your name? Rupa. So Rupa, just to add on to what Rupa said, actually, in my life, in my own personal life, my grandfather, I was attached to my grandfather. He passed away when I was around 14 or 15. And at the time I experienced a lot of fear, about death and questions about, and I had a lot of questions. That's when I started questioning about death, that why we have to go through this and why our loved ones have to go through this. But then, by some arrangement of providence, I got a copy of Bhagavad Gita and I was reading the Bhagavad Gita, and it gave me a lot of solace even at that time when I was just 13 or 14 years old, because this whole concept can, it rewires our whole paradigm and it expands our horizon and broadens our knowledge actually. And of course, one of the things is it can help us to overcome fear. Anything else? Yeah.
How do you break the cycle?
How do you?
Break the cycle
Sorry,
of
we'll come to that.
born again and again and again.
Sure. We are right now in the first grade level of the course, so you'll have to wait for a few more sessions to get there. We'll get there in the future sessions.
The reason I asked is because she said she doesn't feel fear, but I felt fear. I was like, when I thought of time being eternal, I've seen this world, and do I really want to go through that?
Right, that's a good point. Time being eternal, of course, all these answers will be covered in the future sessions. It's not that we have to be stuck here.
I hope not.
Yeah. So there is a way we can get out, and that's why, because in the last session we talked about how we are going to solve the problems of death, old age, disease, and birth. So that's one of the main key points from the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah.
So I have this question, like if we are born again and again.
No.
No,
Okay, go ahead.
My question is like, then there is no point of trying to achieve anything, because you know that this is all like.
That's a good point. That's a good realization. But of course, that doesn't mean that one has to be diligent in their duties. One cannot be negligent in their duties. At the same time, one can be detached, and one can, distinguish between even if I keep accumulating things all my life, and even if I keep growing and growing, ultimately everybody has to let go at some point in life, either by force or by death. So that's a good perspective to have in life. In fact, that's a good perspective, because then people can become detached and also can engage in service. Yeah.
If we are supposed to be like this, then where and why does this attachment come from? Because when we are born, we didn't have any thought process of what we are.
Well, the real root cause of attachment is, the starting point is avidya, ignorance. Because we don't have this knowledge, we really live with the understanding that we really live with the conviction, not even conviction, it's delusion that we have this body. And as we keep living in that wrong understanding, then all the other things come about. But the first step towards getting over this is the right understanding given in the Bhagavad Gita.
Shouldn't we take care of our bodies?
No, again, as I said, it's not one being negligent. So generally what we tend to do is we go from one extreme to other extreme. Either we completely take care of the body, or we completely neglect everything and try to be, so it's not an overnight journey. It's a step-by-step incremental journey. And this again, going back to last session, the human body is a gift. The human body is a special kind of body where one can inquire, one can reason. Its purpose is different. So if one has to use it for the purpose it's meant to be. One should not be consumed by it, one should not neglect it, but one should use it what it's meant to be.
So I have one question, like if we are so detached, then we will not be able to feel that empathy to others' problems or our problems. And then we have to feel that also.
Right. This question will be fully answered. For now, I'll just give you a brief answer that when you are connected to the divine source of everything, then you feel connected with everyone. So the part of our identity is also the connecting to our divine source. It's like, how do you feel connected to your mother-in-law or father-in-law? You feel connected through your husband. Or a husband feels connected to his wife's parents through his wife. So similarly, when we feel connected to the divine source, then we can. It's like a bicycle wheel. There is a central spoke. There is a central, what do you call that? Hub. And then there are spokes. So all the spokes are connected to each other. How? Through the hub. So similarly, when there is a divine center in our lives, then we can feel connected to each other through the divine center. Anyway, that's just a brief answer, but later. Okay, so we'll move on. Yeah. That should be relief for some. So, Krishna says, that which pervades the entire body you should know to be indestructible. So this is another principle we just talked about, that we are eternal. That Atma is indestructible. The spiritual entity is indestructible. So this is the Gita's anatomy. The body. So the Krishna says, we are the spiritual entity. We live in the sophisticated vehicle, the body. So we have two kinds of body, which we will not deal with this today, but in the next session we will talk about it. So we have just for now, you can think about, we have a gross body and a subtle body. There are two kinds of body, like how I can have a shirt and a coat. I can have two coverings. Similarly, the real me, the living entity, the spiritual living entity has two coverings, the subtle body and the gross body. Of course, gross body is what we can see, physically see. In fact, there's a beautiful, can you just pass on the Bhagavad Gita to me? One copy? Because there are some books also, towards the end of the session you can take a look at some of these books. So Krishna beautifully, he gives one more analogy. He gives many analogies actually, very beautiful analogies in the Bhagavad Gita, the difference between the body and the self, the spirituals, the real me. So he says, this is the first chapter. So he says, Vasamsha jirnani yata vihaya navani grinati naroparani tata sharirani vihaya jirnani anyani samyati navani dehi. Says, as a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, the spiritual entity, the soul, similarly accepts new material bodies, giving up old and useless ones. So what does Krishna compare the body to in this verse? To clothes. You know, and we can think about how, you know, we don't cry when we change clothes, do we? We just change clothes and throw it, and the useless ones we just throw it. Why? You know, it's because we're not attached to it, we're not invested in it. So we do that. But Krishna compares the body to be like clothes. And he says when it's useless, the spiritual entity gives it up and goes on to take another one, like how we change clothes. Yeah.
Prabhuji, one question here is that is the transfer of Atma happen instantly or?
We'll come to that when we talk about transmigration. Yeah. Yeah. This is what we discussed. The car and the driver. Of course, nowadays there is driverless cars, but barring the driverless car, you know, we can also use this analogy. The car is compared to the body, and the driver to the self, the Atma, the spiritual self. And then these are differences between the body and the Atma. The body is made of matter, material elements. What is it you said? Cells, right. It's made of the material elements. The material elements mainly Krishna talks about earth, water, fire, air and ether. Bhumi, rapo, anago, vayu, kam, mano, buddhir, evacha, ahankara, ATMA, binna, prakriti, ashtita. So out of those 8 elements Krishna says are material elements. Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence and false ego. These are the 8 material elements Krishna says. So the body is made up of the 5 gross elements: earth, water, fire, air and ether. And the Atma, the spiritual self, is not made of any of these material elements. It's made of, it's a different category altogether. It's a spiritual element. It's not made of these material elements. The body is destructible and temporary. The Atma is indestructible. The body is born and it dies. The Atma is permanent, ever fresh. The body is not conscious. We are conscious. The body appears to be alive because of the presence of Atma, or consciousness. Otherwise, this is dead matter. Matter doesn't have consciousness. Matter doesn't exhibit consciousness. It's the Atma which exhibits consciousness. So we exhibit consciousness through this body. So that's the difference between a living body and a dead body. A living person, we can, you know, show love, affection. You know, there is exchange of feelings, mellows, and so on and so forth. All those things are coming because there's a conscious living being on one side and there's a conscious living being on the other side. Let's say the same living person, just a few minutes after he or she dies, will we exchange the same thing to the dead body? No. I mean, this was the same person a few minutes ago. What is the difference? It's because of the presence and the absence of the Atma. So that's what makes a difference. It's like how a car appears to be alive because there's a driver sitting in the car. And the same car, if the driver steps out, it becomes dead. Or just matter, it doesn't function. In fact, I heard an interesting incident. So there was actually so a passenger got into a taxi cab, and then the taxi driver was driving him, and then he wanted to actually tell him some directions. So what he did was he opened that the window, and then he actually tapped on the driver's shoulder, and then suddenly the driver went into a shock, and then he went into a panic, and then the whole car swerved to another direction, and then finally he fought to bring the car back under control, and he stopped at one place. And then the passenger was bewildered. He said, I did nothing. I just tapped you to give you some directions, and What happened? Why did you go into this panic mode? He said, because till yesterday I was driving a mortuary van with dead bodies behind. Because he was so habituated in doing that, there is sudden out of his habituation, that when somebody alive came and tapped him, he fell into his whole, context, and then he got bewildered. It's, if we feel completely different for a living person and a dead body. It's total, it's all intuitive. We can experience it intuitively. But how the difference happen within a matter of moments? Because of the presence and absence of consciousness.
I might be getting this wrong, but does the Atma, does it have qualities?
Does it have?
Qualities.
Yeah. Qualities like? What do you mean by that? It does have qualities, yes. Short answer. But qualities which are
Qualities, do those qualities transfer for every birth?
yeah, I understand. So this the good point, but it will be answered in the next session. I'm keeping the suspense going because it's out of scope of today's session. But yes, it's not the Atma which carries. Atma has an inherent set of qualities, like a white light has an inherent set of qualities. Because it's pure. You can say many things, like a drop of water which is pure has an inherent set of qualities. But then when you cover that with white light, the color paper, according to the color paper you cover it will start exhibiting different colors. So similarly, a pure drop of water or pure water, if you mix it with many things, it will all start exhibiting the qualities of the things that it gets mixed with. So similarly, something like that.
Can that colored paper be your upbringing?
It is many factors, but upbringing is one, yes.
So what happens when we sleep? What happens to Atma?
So when we sleep, what goes to a sleep state is the body. Of course, Atma also, sometimes in the sleeping mode. But then you can see even when the body is resting, we can experience a lot of things in dreams.
That's not always.
That's not always.
I understand if the body needs a reset,
Right.
it goes to sleep.
Right.
Does Atma also need a reset?
No,
Remember most of the things.
right. The Atma doesn't need a reset, but it also can go into a sleeping state, where the exhibition of consciousness is minimized. Like we all exhibit consciousness, to different degrees, and when we go into a sleep state, that's minimized. Like I can minimize a window, and then there's no more showing. So the exhibition of consciousness can be minimized. So there are different levels of exhibition of consciousness in different bodies, and they're all different. Exhibition is varying. For example, the exhibition of consciousness in animal is less than how much a human can exhibit. The exhibition of consciousness in an aquatic is less than how a mammal can exhibit. The exhibition of consciousness in a plant is even more restricted than all the other living species of lives. So depending on different species of life also, there are varying degrees of expression of consciousness. But the human has the best ability for the expression of consciousness, or the highest ability for the expression of consciousness. So how to perceive the Atma? Using intuition, inference and experience. So perceiving by intuition. Yeah, I think I'll skip these. This is intuitively we can understand there is a difference between a living body and a dead body. That's what this slide shows. Kathy is gone, the body is there, so who is gone? Right? And then perceiving the Atma by inference. So the nature of, so these are the things, these are the three things we try to avoid. We don't want to die, we don't want to suffer, and we don't want to be in ignorance. Agree? Yeah. Of course, we don't want these three, we resist these three, but by nature's arrangement, all these things come to us. That is, we suffer, many times. We are born into ignorance. We have to learn A, B, C, D, and then one after another, and so many things in life we have to learn. So, but we want to be, our original nature is that we are eternal, we are full of knowledge, and we are blissful. So intuitively, by inference, you can see why we don't want to die. Why we don't want to die? Because we are eternal. That's why death is a foreign experience to us. You can explore these feelings. Why we don't want to suffer? Anybody here who wants to suffer? We have a special list there actually. You can put your name. So we don't want to suffer. Why? Because by inherently we are blissful. Our inherent nature is bliss. Our inherent nature is we are eternal. So when something goes against our nature, then we resist. That's why we resist all these three. Because our inherent nature is these three. And we are full of knowledge. This is our true nature, full of knowledge. But then when we are born with this body, then we are covered with ignorance. That's why we don't like these three. You should question why we don't like these three. Because this is our inherent nature. It's contrary to us.
So the Atma is eternal and full of knowledge. When you're born, why does it get carried through?
Good question. So there are two kinds of knowledge. Anyway, just to give you a brief answer, two kinds of knowledge: material knowledge, spiritual knowledge. So the spiritual realization that one attains, Krishna says they carry it over. So if one makes spiritual advancement, let's say 20% in one life, that carries over. But then whatever material knowledge one accumulates, in terms of Shisha, Java, C++, sorry, that's not carried over. But even though the language, the details are not carried over, but some kind of the mentality is carried over, for sure. But whatever spiritual advancement one makes in terms of realizing oneself, that is carried over from life to life. And for that matter, any other thing, material knowledge, wealth, nothing is, you cannot write in your will, Please wait for my next life. In fact, there was a business proposal, that we should try to find where one person is going from one life to another and then start a business and say that we will capture all your income and everything and then transfer you to your next life.
So is it because of some nature of Atma that we see everybody around us dying and we feel that we are not going to die?
Yeah, that's a very good point, yes. In fact, this is one of the questions that Yaksha Prashna, that in Mahabharata, the Yaksha asks Maharaj Yudhishthira, what is the most surprising thing to you in this world? And what does Maharaj Yudhishthira answer?
Everybody dies.
He says that everybody sees there are living entities dying, all around them. But one still thinks he will live here forever and lives and plans life in such a way that he'll live here forever. That is the most surprising things to me. And of course, there is a reason why one lives in that way, because we are eternal. And one has that intuitive understanding that I am eternal, and one cannot accept the idea that I can perish. Yeah.
About being ignorant, I don't think people don't want to be ignorant. Most of us are ignorant. Just you said like Atma is full of knowledge, so I haven't seen any kid who likes to go to school to gain knowledge. Our mind works in such a way, if you give someone to like learn new skills, they'll move away from that. Like they won't read or they won't.
Well, I mean, kids may not want to go to school because they have exams there, but we always have the curiosity to learn. Curiosity to learn and the inquisitiveness to learn, actually. I don't think that goes away forever, but the method in which things are done, one may accept or reject. But always the curiosity to learn is there.
So you mentioned that spiritual progress is carried from life to life, and so once we reach the full maturity of that spiritual progress, what happens? Do we get out of the cycle of birth and death?
Yeah. So that's once we realized our true self as the spiritual self, then one gets the ticket to, or the visa to get out of, to go into the land of, the spiritual land. Like how we all had to work hard to come, to come here to get a visa, right? So similarly, we need qualification and visa to get into the spiritual kingdom, or the spiritual realm. Yes.
Is that moksha?
Yeah, that's what is called as moksha.
So who gets the moksha? Is the body or like soul?
No, the body, the Atma. The Atma is the real self. The body perishes, stays here. It goes back to the material energy. The body dies, it goes back to earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Goes back to its elements. And so the spiritual self, the real self, the real me, attains liberation or moksha. Yeah. Right. So, moving on. So, the sunlight, it can be cloudy days, which few days, for the past few days, it has been a little bit cloudy, but still you can feel the presence of the sun. How? By the sunlight. So similarly, the presence of Atma can be perceived by the presence of consciousness. So consciousness implies presence of Atma. What is the difference? Again, difference between a robo and a person. A person can see a sunset, right, and can experience many things: wonder, happiness, beauty. He can express many things. But then a robo can also detect a sunset, can it? Yeah, it can detect a sunset by gauging the nature of the light and so on and so forth. But can he experience any of these things? So what is that experiences all these things? That is Atma. What is that experiences happiness? This emotions. What is it that experiences distress? What is it that experiences this honest? All these different experiences and emotions are coming. What is it that experience? That is the Atma. That is the difference between a robo and a person.
How would you differentiate between the mind and the soul?
The mind and the soul. I mean, there are ways to. You can think about. The mind as a neural network, highly sophisticated neural network, which prompts thousands of suggestions every second. And you are the living person, who's the experiencer of everything. That's a short answer. but we'll cover it in more detail next week. Yeah.
So you said like all these things are the feelings of Atma, but
I mean, Atma is the experience of all these different emotions. He's experiencing it.
So if I experience sadness, it's because the Atma is experiencing sadness. Then how do I separate myself?
No, you perceive something and then it changes the state of your mind. If you view it as unfavorable, then you experience sadness.
So how do I differentiate from like material sadness and that sadness that my Atma is feeling?
Well, you have to, yes, that's a good point. In short, the answer is you have to distinguish between you and the body. That's the first step. And a step higher than that is that you have to distinguish between you and the mind. And when you do that, then you can step away. That doesn't mean that you will be lack of emotions, but it's just that things that's perceived previously with a selfish motive of what is it going to, what's in it for me. Mainly we view things in terms of what's in it for me, what I'm going to get out of this. And so all our happiness and sadness comes from that perspective. The stock market goes down. Oh, it's, all my stocks, all my money is, I'm losing a lot of money. So then that mentality will disappear in terms of what is my profit and loss. So one becomes selfless from a spiritual perspective.
Happiness and sadness come purely from your perception of things. It is just
Right.
how you relate to things. There is nothing absolute happiness or
Right.
anything.
Good point. Yes. In fact, we can illustrate it by an example that you can. What are some of your favorite food items? Do we want to actually cook them for you for the dinner? I'm just kidding. What is some of let's say you have your list of favorite items, and your friend invites you and then puts it all on the plate, and then invites you for lunch, and then you go and see it, and what would be your feeling? Jubilee, yeah, being delighted and being very happy. And at the same time, you get a phone call from another friend that you have failed in 4 exams. The same plate of food is right in front of you. Will you feel the same delight? You will not feel the same delight. Your happiness is gone now. Because it's how we perceive it. Ultimately, this is material happiness. This is external happiness based on external things. What Krishna talks about, or we'll talk about in the future sessions, is the happiness from within, which is never changing.
So based on the series of these conversations, what I understood is that the mind perceives these,
And the mental state can change at any time. And the mental state can change. What was supposed to give you happiness a few minutes ago will not give you this happiness.
Right, so then whatever the mind perceives is what the Atma reacts to?
Atma accepts. And when that stops, then one can go deeper. Yeah.
And what you perceive is based on all your judgments, your experiences, and all your belief system, and that's what you're driven by. You change your belief system, and then things change.
Right. In fact, the reason we practice meditation, and especially mantra meditation here, is to change the filters of perceptions that we have, and to broaden it and to enlighten it, so that the mind can become a clear lake, through which one can see one's own reflection. So here it is. Wherever you see presence of consciousness, the Atma is there. Actually, my computer is dying, so I think we will end the session. So it doesn't matter. It has to be a human species. It can be any species. But wherever you see a presence of consciousness, the Atma is there. The spirit is there. And in fact, I just read a joke. There was a pastor who was he spent most of his life giving sermons to in his church, to his congregation members. And then at the same time, there was a taxi driver, and both of them were doing their own occupation. The pastor was giving his sermons every day, and the taxi driver was driving his taxis. Then both of them died after they became old, and then both of them went to heaven. And then the pastor went to the heaven, and then he saw that the taxi driver, so he was assigned a position in the heaven, and then taxi driver was assigned a higher position. So he was very troubled by that. So he asked God, what is this? I will spend my whole life, giving sermons, glorifying you, and talking to the congregation members. Why is he given a higher? He was just driving taxi. Why is he given a higher position than me? Then God said, well, be judged, and give the position according to the results. And then he explained that when you are giving sermons, most of the times, people are sleeping. And then he said, but when the person was driving the taxi, all the times people were awake. And in fact, they were praying. So, judging by the result, we give a higher position to the taxi driver. Anyway, so I'll just. So, can I see the Atma? This is a very normal. Generally, the question people ask: can I see? Then seeing is believing. But then how can we refute it? Can you see perfume in a rose flower? Can you see oil in sesame seeds? Can you see fire in wood? Can you see ghee in milk? But jaggery in sugar candy. In fact, this is a verse. Pushpe gandham tile tailam ashte agnim payase gratam iksha gudam tata deha pashyatmanam vivektaha. So what it means is, we can see all these different results from the original element when the original element goes through a process. When the original element goes through a process, then you can see, like ghee. How can you see a ghee in milk? You cannot see. But when ghee goes through a process, then at one stage you can see ghee. So similarly, how can you see the Atma? We are the objects. When we go through the process of Bhakti Yoga and meditation, mantra meditation, then automatically we'll also be able to perceive our true self, the Atma, when we go through the process. So, follow the process. By following the process, spiritual process, one can actually perceive one's true self. Like how we can get different elements. As mentioned in these examples. So, perceiving the Atma by direct experience. This is what the Gita says. The Gita says direct perception possible through yoga and meditation. So Krishna says, in the stage of perfection called trance or samadhi, one's mind is completely restrained from material mental activities. By practice of yoga, this perfection is characterized by one's ability to see the self by the pure mind and to relish and rejoice in the self. In that joyous state, one is situated in boundless transcendental happiness realized through transcendental senses. Established thus, one never departs from the truth. And upon gaining this, he thinks there is no greater gain. Being situated in such a position, one is never shaken, even in the midst of greatest difficulty. So one can perceive, one can realize one's true identity, then these are the results. One enters a joyful state and one is not disturbed, and so on and so forth. But it's possible, this direct perception is possible through a process of Bhakti Yoga and mantra meditation. Anyway, I think we still have So empirical evidence, these are some of the empirical evidences of Atma, near-death experiences, past life memories, and hypnotic regression. This is a near-death experiences. I think it's Michael Sober. So there was a cardiologist actually who has recorded many incidents of near-death experiences. Because he's dealing with cases where people go into cardiac arrest and then almost on the verge of death, and then he brings back people. So he recounts some of those experiences. I think it's Michael Sobom. That's the doctor's name. Where he recounts, the patients recount the near-death experiences. That's that the patient dies or he's in an unconscious state, and they're actually performing a surgery or performing, what do you call that? CPR. And then the patient recounts all the details of what happens when the body is unconscious. So he has recorded hundreds and hundreds of such incidents during his life as a doctor by these cases. And then there is Dr. Ian Stevenson, who he's no more, but he was a psychiatrist, he was a professor of psychiatry at the University of Virginia. He's recorded more than 2,000 cases of past life memories, where kids start to, very small kids, they start to remember details, they start to experience details from their past lives. And he's recorded all these different incidents extensively in his books. So you can go and Google it up, Dr. Ian Stevenson. And so I think we'll stop here before we break for dinner. Are there any more comments and questions? We'll resume the rest of the session next week. So if you don't have any questions, so we will do a few minutes of meditation. Is that okay? Yeah. So let's do a few minutes of meditation before we break out for dinner. So you can sit up straight. So we'll take a few deep breaths just to calm our mind. So you can sit comfortably, but please sit straight. So take a deep inhalation. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. So continue with a few deep breaths. Keep your focus on the breath. Continue with your deep breaths. Try to focus on the breath. Try to bring your attention to the breath. You can do this, at your home as well for more time. And because of lack of time, we'll go to the next part of the meditation, where we'll take a deep breath and then we will chant the mantra Om in unison. And then we'll try to hear the sound of the mantra. We'll try to bring your attention to the mantra, to the sound. Take a deep breath. And then we'll chant. Take a deep breath. And then we'll chant.